Again, I want to welcome all of you for being here today. I want to also thank everyone for the time, the effort, the participation. We've had many meeting events, open houses, visiting various facilities. We had a trip to the Seattle-Portland area for those of you, and we encourage everyone on the commission. I think it's really important if you can make the time to particularly go and look at some of these facilities, because we're looking at the best practices that other places have to offer. If you can do that, it would really be appreciated. So I want to thank you for all the participation that you've given us over this last period of time. And I also want to tell you that the public input meeting that was held on the third floor of the City and County building, many of you were there and saw, it was a great crowd. We received an enormous amount of input. It came in various forms, people responding to the boards. If you were there, we had boards and dots and things that people could signify that they wanted to prioritize. We also had some video, which I thought was very well done, the video piece, where people could go on video and give their input for us. And then we accepted comments and written information as well. It was very well attended. It was very important for us because, again, while we're going through this rather methodical, careful process, part of what we're doing is being transparent and open, trying to get to everyone who wants to be part of this process. This is really a public process from which and during which we will try and guide an agenda to get us to the goal line, so to speak. So it's really important for us to meet in large groups, small groups, and have these public meetings so that people can participate and be a part of this. So with that being said, again, I want to welcome all of you, and I want to first thing on our agenda today is I want to turn some time over to Carlton Christensen, who will give us an update and talk about the county collective impact process that is going on simultaneously with our process. So Carlton, would you begin?
Sure, Palmer, thank you. And I was looking at the agenda and I have 3 minutes to go, right? To keep on track.
No, you take as much time as you need because we want to hear about this.
I learned over the years in politics to stay on agenda, but we'll make it fairly quick. You should find at your place a handout that looks like this, and if you look on the back side of it, you'll see 2 concentric circles with the collaboration in the middle. And this was done early in the process as the city had its recognition of a need in looking at facility placement and issues surrounding the facility, and the county moving forward on a collective impact model for homeless services. And we recognize that these 2 processes would likely go on at the same time. Ours would be an ongoing process. I think yours has a roughly end-of-year time frame to it. But they were separate enough that while there would be a lot of information that would come from respective processes, that we were better off collaborating and having those be 2 separate processes. So earlier this year, Mayor McAdams convened a collective impact steering commission and committee. And when you look at the collective impact model, bringing together a wide variety of folks, which would include some providers, certainly funding agencies, participants from the private sector, as well as some general public members as well, bringing together and forming a common agenda. And over a series of meetings, we've developed some outcomes that we would like to see, decided what would be some indicators that would help us measure our progress toward those outcomes. And we are in the process of finalizing those outcomes, those indicators, and actually what statistics we can use to measure that progress. And we anticipate coming back in our June meeting and reviewing that with the steering committee. From that point forward, we'll continue to measure the process of the services and how they're interacting with each other. And our goal down the road is to understand when they're not working together or there's challenges, collectively, how can we solve those problems? And working both in funding emphasis as well as looking for some strategies that would make the system itself work at a much higher level. Getting there is not going to be sort of it will not be without discussion. There will undoubtedly be a number of intense but cordial discussions with each other about those shared measurements, what directions we would like to go, and look strategically and collectively how that outcome can best facilitate really the goal of not having people move through the system in an efficient way, and if there's ways to avoid having them enter the system to begin with, and looking at it truly from the pre-homeless stage to getting them out of the homeless services altogether. We'll also look at some side issues that if there are ways to avoid having them go into that. We are working, I want to introduce, if I can, Shalene Gee. Shalene, would you stand up? Shalene was just hired by Salt Lake County as our partnership and special projects coordinator. She'll be working with that steering committee and helping them to guide through that process. We will continue to work with the remainder of our regional development staff and facilitating and helping along with our city and state partners as well as providers of the service, bringing the data together so that those measurements can be done, and then and look at, we anticipate this being an ongoing process. This isn't a committee that meets and then produces a report, and because there will be, without doubt, ongoing adjustments as we look at the process and how our funding is used, and looking strategically at some of the issues associated with homelessness. The one sheet gives you a general framework of that. Our steering committee, Shalene, remind me, is about 24 or so. I might be off a couple. So it does take in a wide variety of interested parties. We would be the first to recognize that it doesn't include everybody. But in order to have a group small enough to facilitate these kinds of discussions, we had to limit it. We will create some subcommittees within that steering committee that will look at particular aspects of the services and have particular focuses, whether they're housing or mental health issues or other issues that clearly impact homelessness. And it will be an ongoing effort. In that role, the county, as it facilitates that, at some point in time, there may be another agency or organization that becomes the backbone of that. That would be a collective decision by the committee, but for the time being, the county's acting as that backbone agency. In our working with the city and this committee, we know that there's a lot of service issues that are coming out of these discussions. We want to respect that, and we'll take those comments and those concerns and bring that into our process, and that will be, as we look at the data and those concerns, we'll collectively evaluate those issues and so that they can be integrated in the plan as we move forward.
Now, we wanted to leave a little time for questions for Carlton. So are there any questions that anybody has on the commission itself?
You're all letting me off easy.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine, and we've talked about this, there are communications that we want to bring to the collective impact process as well from our group. So just as we're bringing communications today from the collective impact group, we'll want to also reciprocate in that respect.
And there's a number of members on this commission that also sit on our steering committee, and then certainly the city and the state are participating in this process. And I would recognize Tamara Kohler and then Mike Gallegos, who's my deputy associate director, and so we continue to work jointly with both the city and the state in this process.
Okay, thank you. And let me, Gail and I have been sharing, co-chairing and sharing each meeting, and I was up today, but I didn't want to not, I want to acknowledge her. So she is here today, and while I'll be conducting, we're both chairing, so thank you, Gail. The next item, I'm going to turn the time over to Michelle to conduct the community commitments and values portion of this. And do you want to take it from there?
Is this working? I mean, can you hear me? Is really the bigger question. Okay, good. So I want to walk you through the pile of stuff in front of you. Wow. Pile of stuff in front of you. So first is the collective impact, which Carlton was talking about. Next is the agenda for today. It's white paper. Hopefully I'm going to get my colors right. Okay, the next. Next, so so the next is proposed revisions to the community commitments and values, which we'll talk about in a minute on teal. I'm told this is teal. But so the next three is the public input that was received since the last commission meeting. And that public input includes the open house that Palmer referenced on April 29th. And at the open house, people had the opportunity to give comments via sticky notes, via these little videos, note cards, and then there was dot voting. And we also received emails. I received emails as the facilitator, which I forwarded to the city, and then the city received some emails directly. So those have been compiled on your pieces of paper here. And the city's online Open City Hall also had a series of comments, which we picked a particular day, and there may have been more comments since that day, but on whatever day it was that we collected them, that's what you have. So in terms of the comments received for community commitments and values, that's in purple. The comments received on factors for success is pink, and then general public comments, or general comments that didn't seem to fit into those two categories, are all on the white one, general comments. So this is a consolidation of all of those different ways that we've been receiving public comment, and we are sharing, I am right now sharing it with Carlton and the county, I guess, because you have it on your pile. But this, as you said, mentioned, Carlton, there is a lot of comment coming that is relevant for both commissions or committees, whatever our names here are, COMMs. And so I think that will be, this is a good way for you to also share the information that we're hearing from the public. What else on your pile? And the final thing on your pile is for a later item on the agenda, which is suggested criteria. So with that, community commitments and values. Sorry, how to open it up, it's not mine. Hopefully, okay. So just to give a little bit of background, we had presented suggested language on community commitments and values at the last commission meeting in March. We got a lot of feedback during that meeting, also feedback through these various public input processes, and overall I would say that it was overly highly supportive. The feedback that we got was highly supportive of the suggestions that were up for commitments and values. There were suggestions to clarify and strengthen language, which I'm going to go through now in terms of proposed revisions. And the proposed revisions that I'm going to suggest to you, or that I'm going to talk about to you, were developed actually with both Gail and Palmer. The co-chairs were very, very involved, having read all the public input and sort of trying to digest it. And to the extent that some of the language is proposed to be revised, that's kind of where it comes from in general. So I'm going to go through them one by one. You can choose to look at the teal. Did we decide this was teal? The teal sheet that just has the old language, the original language, and the proposed revisions. Or, if you are so inclined, you can follow with the purple, where it's one commitment and one value at a time, and also gives you all the public input. So, however you choose to do it. Everybody's brain. We all know that our brain has much more capacity to process than our mouths have capacity to speak, right? So, but I do want you to pay attention. Okay. So, just wanted to cover again briefly before we even start the mission of this commission. Is to carefully and deliberately consider, advise, and recommend the best configuration and location for shelter and other emergency homeless services. So, in the end, that's what this group is going to be making recommendations on. And so, the first commitment. and I'm not going to read the original proposal, but I will read the proposed revision. So in terms of the comments, I would say that the comments in general affirmed the significant value of current service providers and the current services that are being provided, but and recognized that the challenge is to do even more, that it's better to do even more. And the comments were really that maybe that we had not adequately affirmed the value, that it wasn't a positive enough statement, I guess. And so what the proposed revision is that based on community input, our commission, that's you, recognizes that the status quo regarding homeless facilities, supportive services, and affordable permanent housing is not sufficient. So this language, this proposed revised language, to a large extent, is actually suggested rewording verbatim from one of the public comments based on community input piece we added, the co-chairs added. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go just through each of them, and then we can have discussion. Is that okay if I do that? All right, so commitment number 2. The original wording was intended to focus on providing for individuals experiencing homelessness now and into the future. And in other words, essentially to say this isn't a one-off effort. This focus, this commission and the county's commission on homelessness isn't a one-off effort. And the comments that we received sort of really seemed to think that the sustainability piece, that into the future, commitment into the future, was not really clear. So the proposed revisions are intended to clarify the ongoing nature of the commission. And again, we used some of the suggested wording from public input. And our proposed revision is, it is important that our community accept, increase, and sustain a commitment to care for the homeless population now and in the future. So to try to focus more clearly on it, we're sustaining now and sustaining into the future. Good. Okay, community value number 1. There were no significant, there were a few comments, but the comments sort of reiterated, from what we could understand, reiterated the point of the value, that safety for everyone, homeless individuals, people who are, residents, visitors, everybody, safety for everyone is a top priority. And so we don't have any proposed revision because it seemed to accurately capture what we were trying to say. It's the only one that doesn't propose revision. Okay, value number 2. The comments had some listings that were reminders about the diversity of the homeless population. So there are quite a few different comments that said, well, the homeless population has this category and this category and this category. We obviously aren't going to list them all. So our proposed revision used several of the suggested rewordings, but not the list. And now what we're proposing is we recognize the diversity of people experiencing homelessness and value their innate human dignity. And again, that takes the wording from some of the public input with rewording that was suggested by several people. Number 3. Okay, number 3. The original wording was intended to suggest that we help individuals experiencing homelessness feel part of the community and be part of the community. But from the comments, it is very clear that we missed the mark, that our original suggestion, that's not what people read in that comment. What people read in the comment was that we should have a public process. We should use a collaborative process. We should seek public input. And that is generally what this commission, that's what you are doing. So we have now tried to rewrite it in a way that perhaps more clearly states what was originally intended. And this suggested rewording, as I understand it, has been vetted with a few people in the community to see whether now maybe this is closer. And the folks that it was vetted with said, yes, this is good. So it doesn't mean you have to say this is good, but we think maybe we're closer. So we seek to provide facilities to help those experiencing homelessness effectively network and build positive, productive connections with each other and the larger community. Okay. Number 4. Sorry, I did a community meeting last night in Rockville, which is kind of a long drive from here. So I really need to use my notes today. Sorry about that. Okay, value number 4, the comments to a large extent said, don't prejudge configuration. We hope this value statement is not trying to prejudge configuration. Don't assume that a full range of services has to be in one facility. And I think the commission, as we've been talking to the commission and as you've been talking, I think all options are on the table at this point. And I don't think anybody in the original proposal had ever intended that. And so we took a suggestion for rewording, which is actually relatively minor, but from the person who made the suggestion apparently clarifies it. So facilities should provide access to a full range of services for the homeless population that helps individuals become self-sufficient. And then there were many, many comments about housing. And so we are suggesting that maybe there should be an additional community value. And you will see at the bottom that we have suggested that it's important, but outside the scope of this commission's work, yet a very important concept. And it's we recognize that affordable housing provides the best hope for helping people out of homelessness, and we commend all related efforts. Okay, so with that, discussion, observations. Before I'm going to so just so you know, I'm going to test, after we have discussion about it, I'm going to test for consensus, just sort of see where people are in general, where you as a group are about these. So any, sorry?
Right here.
I'm sorry,
Question.
thank you. Hi, yes.
I like your little reminder here. It's basically saying be nice. I will be nice.
That's right.
You know what? In looking at these, the only thing that I would ask us to look at is community commitment number 1. As we look at the way it was originally proposed, it talks about regarding the status quo. It's very short, but it says that the facilities are not acceptable. I understand kind of giving greater context to that, because certainly we don't want to minimize or disparage the good and hard work that's happening right now, and I think maybe that's why we're looking at changing it.
Yes.
But when we say that it's not sufficient, what I don't want to do is take the foot off the gas. I don't want to say, because I think we can look at anything that we're doing in any area of public policy and always recognize places where we could do it better. What I would not want to see from the way we've rewritten this is that while it's not sufficient and while we should do better, we're doing it with any less urgency. When you say not acceptable, it's almost a line in the sand to me that we are not going to be comfortable with what's here. We appreciate, we respect, we know that what we have is important, but we're going to do something. And it's reflected in the rest of the commitments as well as the values that we are. This is much more comprehensive than we can always do better. So I would the only thing in reading through all of those that I would ask us maybe to revisit is not sufficient are we soft pedaling it too much? Are we trying to overcome any misunderstanding that we're not happy with the good work that's been done, so we want to be careful how we say that? I just want to make sure that since it's our number 1 commitment, that it really reflects the collective energy and will to see something done. So not sufficient doesn't do that for me. The second follow-up was, well, then what would you say?
You're right, that was going to be.
I know, I could see it in your eyes. I felt your look. I like not acceptable. I really do. But I don't want the negative connotations that maybe were the origin for changing it, but I don't want, as much momentum, as much good as occurred, I don't want any of us to think, or the community to think, that where we're at, minus just some tweak, I just don't want it to be acceptable. I want us to absolutely resolve ourselves to a better, an improved way. Building on the good things that have happened, we're going to have a better way forward. So I like not acceptable. What we have now, acknowledging all the good work that's happened to get us here, we're not going to accept that this is a situation that we want. I don't know. Now I'm talking in circles.
So
Okay.
would you put something like, we resolve to improve? Whatever, would that take care of it, or are you suggesting a complete rewrite?
No, I'm hearing you. It's just those last 2 words. It's the last word, actually, is the one I think you have the concern with.
Maybe adequate?
Adequate? Yeah. Fine lines.
I wonder if we could put on the end those 2 comments that the permanent help, the list of supportive services and affordable permanent housing is not adequately meeting the needs of the homeless population.
And must change. And must change. I want to get blunt. And must change.
And that's a given, though, so
What was the objection?
that's what we're doing.
What was the objection to the original wording?
Yeah, because
So, I'm obviously summarizing and paraphrasing a whole bunch of public comment because there was a lot on this one, but it was essentially that if you read just the original proposal, it devalues or almost ignores all of the really good work that's been done in the past and is currently being done.
But I'm just saying the word acceptable.
The original word?
Is not acceptable. I mean, I kind of agree that it's a much more focused word and not sufficient. And what was wrong with saying not acceptable in the first? I agree with all the inclusions. I'm just saying that word acceptable.
Again,
seems
I'm
powerful to
speaking
me.
on behalf of the public input, but I think it was that not acceptable implies a lot of negative about what's currently being done rather than it's not enough, but we need to do more, we can do more. I think that was what the general
Maybe
feeling
that's
is.
the
Yes,
word we need,
please.
is enough.
You know, I know there's been
It's not
a lot of
enough.
public comment on this. My question being is, how much of this has been representative from just the homeless?
So.
And I think we're defining it, but a big piece of this needs to be asked of the homeless. What
So-
we deem as acceptable or not acceptable is one thing, but we're not the ones living on the streets.
Yes, so I can't answer you specifically with saying homeless individual number 1 said this and homeless individual number 2 said this. However, the public input a lot of the public input included homeless individuals. So my understanding is most of the videos were all individuals experiencing homelessness, and so a lot of what's summarized here is from them. But I can't tell you, this is exactly what one said and one said, but there were.
No, I just
So
bring
there
that
were-
out as,
right.
I think if you ask them, they would very much echo the statement that's there. Maybe with the tweak, as the speaker said, but I think their input is as important as ours.
And you're saying they would echo the original. The adequate is not acceptable or is not
Correct.
sufficient? That is not acceptable.
Correct.
Okay, yes, please.
You know, it seems like just the wording of this, we say that this is the community commitment, and then you read the statement, it says the community commitment is that the facilities are not acceptable. You know, and that's not much of a commitment. And so if we added the word something like, you could even leave that and say, and must improve, or
Okay.
something that implies a commitment, because right now that really isn't a commitment.
So, what if, and I don't want to spend a whole lot more time on it, and that's not to say it's not an important comment, because it's a really important comment, but we can't spend the whole time doing wording by committee. But just in general, if we go with the proposed revision, we're not there. Where are we? There. The proposed revision and add is not sufficient, so blah, 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 is not sufficient and must improve, or something like that. Does that get added? Does it get added for you? Because you're the one who raised it? You're on.
I'm deferring to the collective wisdom of this group. As we're discussing it here, I think that the point that was just made, I think you might be making a statement, but we want to resolve and we want to show that there's a will to make it better and that we must change it. And so I like and must change or must improve. I'd like some end to that statement that points to the direction that we're going. Again, just trying to create, again, that sense of urgency. I think there needs to be a sense of urgency that we're not, because, again, my worry about it's not sufficient, everything I do, I could do better, and I'm not sufficient. And I just don't want there to be I just don't want to water it down.
Okay, so, Matt.
I think Mrs. Miller's suggestion was actually a very good suggestion. And she said basically, ma'am, if I can try to paraphrase, and we commit to improvement. Ma'am, is that essentially what you said? The word commitment is powerful, and we're saying we need to improve what's currently insufficient.
Matt, you good? That took care of that. Okay, and other comments on other commitments or values with the proposed revisions before I ask you to do thumbs, to exercise your thumbs?
For
Yes.
all other values that we've talked
All-
about?
Yeah, the list. Yes,
Yeah, I have a concern
Oh,
with
oh.
community value number 5.
you're next. Sorry. Okay.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Sorry, number 2? Commitment number 2?
Actually, I'd like to, am I up?
You are?
I'm looking at community value number 4. I like the way it's rewritten. Provide access to a full range of services for the homeless population that helps individuals become self-sufficient. And I'd like us to consider adding and integrate into the community. I just feel like that piece is missing a little bit, let's be clear that part of our commitment is to help people reintegrate or integrate into the community.
Okay, any reactions to that, or any objections, I guess I should ask to that? Just for now, I have it written down, but, and it echoes, it echoes number 3 to some extent. Okay. Chris Crosswhite. And I'm sorry that I did that, but she had already started talking.
No, that's fine. My concern is with community value number 5.
The proposed new one.
Yeah, we
Okay.
recognize that affordable housing provides the best hope for helping people out of homelessness, and we commend all other related efforts. I believe affordable housing in whatever source and form of affordable housing is coming is significantly important. But the way this is worded is it is elevating housing and a housing approach to helping the homeless above all other efforts that everybody else is making. And, if this is a community value of the commission, it's really saying that housing is the best way to help, as opposed to dealing with a medical condition or dealing with an addiction or dealing with an immigration status that Catholic Community Services helps with phenomenally. And we're saying the best way to help them is housing. And it devalues by then grouping and I don't have a proposed alternative, but saying we commend all other related efforts, and everybody that is doing anything that is not associated with housing is now just a related effort. And I think that devalues the organizations who are pursuing strategies that their first strategy may not simply be housing. That's my thoughts, my comments.
Fair comment. Other thoughts on this one? Matt?
Yes, I think there's an opportunity. Mike, coming in okay here? I think there's an opportunity, and recognizing Chris's observations and respecting those, but to have community value number 5 outside of this commission's scope of work, I think we might be missing an opportunity, because we already have Mayor Becker's thoughtful initiative regarding 5,000 doors, which could be one of the most effective means by which we get a mass of humanity living in poverty out of our sheltering system and into a permanent, stable situation and reintegrated back into community. I recognize there are a number of other considerations that have to be taken into account, but this dovetails so nicely with 5,000 doors, and it is something that is going to require capital investment, and it is, in effect, capital facilities. And so I would just invite us to consider integrating this, since the mayor already has an initiative to do so. That would be all.
Do you have your hand up? Would you like to speak? Yes, I think. Are you on?
So one of the things that I think is becoming reality with regards to housing is our market rate here in the city. We're about at 97.5%. So there's a 2% cap on that. And I think as we see market rates continue to go up in the city, there's going to be less affordable housing. And when you go into permanent housing, and once you sign that, there's a responsibility to pay for that for the rest of the life of that individual. And we've seen Congress just cut the budget, and we have also seen that STEM money starting to run out. And if you did the math on this, and Matt knows this number, and we had estimated at the PPC that there could be 350, 400 people that would be at jeopardy on this, and Matt had thought that it would be around 450. You're going to have to come up with $80 million a year projected out that someone's going to have to start to pay for this. So there's a lot of there's a lot of dynamics to this that we all need to think carefully about, and what we're going to do and how it's going to be funded in the future. The speaker just committed that he'd fund that for the next 4 years. Just want to get that on the record.
It's a good thing you're sitting next to each other.
No, I know you're from the Senate. Let me say something.
So can I make a process suggestion that perhaps integrates both of these comments a little bit and suggest that maybe it shouldn't be a value, but that getting at the housing, the mental health issues, the addiction issues, some of the issues that that create the conditions of homelessness and then help or prevent people from staying out of homelessness, that you as a commission have recommendations, some recommendation. I'm not going to word it now because we'll come back with something if you think it's a good idea. But I think that you as a commission can have recommendations that perhaps go a little beyond or outside of the actual mission that you've been given, but that assert the importance, the value, but it isn't a value like this, but assert the importance and value of efforts to get at those other things, the housing, to get at affordable housing, to get at mental health services. I'm not being terribly articulate about it, but yes.
So Michelle, I think to what Chris and Matt were saying, I think is very important is there's 5 words in there we could probably eliminate and replace that may help. Right now it's saying this is one of the highest priorities. We're tied in what they're saying. It may not be. So what if we took and looked at eliminating the words provides the best hope for helping and said is one of the important elements in assisting people out of homelessness. So we're not saying, hey, it's our sole focus, but guess what? All efforts to support that should be commended.
So I think it's an excellent, personally, I think it's an excellent wordsmithing suggestion, but it doesn't then get at Chris's comment, which I think is also a very valid one, that housing is really important, but it's not the only thing.
That's why I said it's one of the key elements.
Right. So the reason working with the co-chairs, we even had a proposal to talk about housing is because there was so much public comment about housing. And there was less about the important issues that you're raising. Yes, didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was interrupting you, I apologize. I'm not opposed to affordable housing, and God knows that the graduates of the rescue mission need affordable housing. And I do think that we're devaluing other providers. And I feel, I'll share my opinion, that all of our efforts in enabling a person to rebuild their lives and face their addiction and their mental illness and the other causes of homelessness, so they can then obtain a job and then pay for their own housing, that they need affordable housing. This is an insult to me, and I know that's not intended to be an insult, but it is because it's relegating the changed life as less important than simply whether or not the person is housed. I do believe we are addressing the issue of affordable housing in our commitment number 1. And I'd like to go back to commitment number 1 and said supportive services, which would be then everything else we're still doing, and affordable permanent housing is insufficient and we commit to improve. So we're already elevating, and I completely acquiesce to this statement, affordable permanent housing in our commitment number 1, that we're elevating it there. And it is my thought that community value number 5 devalues all of the other efforts to a point of it being inappropriate.
Yes. Yeah, please.
I think maybe you can hear me without the microphone. Oh, thank you very much. I like that comment, Chris. I think that maybe it's augmented by making an adjustment to community value number 4, and then it would allow us to remove the value number 5. Because I think what we're talking about is a continuum of services that will support prevention of homelessness and then sustained residency that goes to mental health services as well as affordable housing and a number of things that might be outside of the range of what we think of as current facility offering. But I've heard us talk a lot so far in this commission, and some of the comments I've read so far have to do with things that are mental health or affordable housing or even crisis management for before someone loses housing. So I wonder about making an adjustment in value 4 that would speak to that continuum, to that the facilities should provide access to a full range of services, including prevention and resolution of homelessness, something to that effect that could be more encompassing.
You're suggesting that we add that?
And eliminate value 5.
Yes, yes. So for 4, where we are, you're suggesting facilities should provide access to a full range of services for the homeless population, including, that helps individuals become sufficient, including prevention, and there was something else? Question mark? Is that what you suggested?
Housing. Restoring housing,
Thank you.
or something to that effect.
Okay. So, other big picture comments? Yes?
I just have a clarifying question. I'm kind of taken aback that referring to housing for the homeless is there's a resistance to, or even an offense that it's being prioritized. It's like talking about the hungry and omitting food. I mean, let's call this population something different than homeless if we're not going to recognize that having a roof over your head and all that comes with that, being able to sustain that household. I mean,
So that is not what I
yeah,
heard
so what
at
is
all.
wrong with identifying that having the ability to have housing is one of the important aspects of what we're doing here?
So, right, I think,
That's the
if
evaluation
I'm
comment.
understanding Chris correctly, and you'll correct me if I'm not getting it right, but affordable housing, very important for a large number of those in the homeless population. But for another large number, there are other things that one can address, and they will be able to find their own housing.
And this is just a question for the new guy. So they can afford the housing, but there's other things in their lives that keep them from being,
Mental health and
so they're
addiction
not,
is what I'm
it's
hearing
not,
as
it's
some
not
of the
a,
examples.
it's not that, it's that it's not affordable, it's that the other barriers in their life,
Well,
is that right?
it's not affordable because
Okay.
they can't get a job because they have mental health issues or are addicted. And if those issues, if those personal issues are addressed, then they would be able to get a job. And I think it's that there's a broader range of issues than housing that are the reasons why people are homeless or stay in homelessness.
Thanks.
So this,
Community
Is
value
it-
number 5, as it's written, is stating
Right.
as a commission and as a community, we are stating the best possible way to help a person is by giving them affordable housing.
okay,
And that's what my objection is to. With Michelle's comment, if we would like, and I believe affordable housing is incredibly important, for me, we can drop community value number 5 in an entirety and leave everything else as it is. If you would like to focus a little bit more on community value or on affordable housing, I would adapt what Kathy suggested back on community value number 4, and simply, Kathy made a suggestion saying, and integrate into the community. We can say, and integrate into affordable housing in the community. And just add an element of affordable housing back into our community value number 4, and then drop in entirety community value number 5.
okay, so we're not going to wordsmith. Are you bringing up a new point, or are we wordsmithing?
Bringing up a new point,
Thank you.
I would agree with any of the proposed changes here. I think that that's good, and I want to respect Chris's sensitivities here because he's quite in tune. But I do want to speak to Speaker Hughes' question just earlier. There are thousands of people who are living at or below the federal poverty level for whom housing is out of reach, Speaker. So your question is well stated, and there is a tremendous gap as it relates to people living at or below poverty and the cost of housing currently.
I think I guess from what I've read and heard, if there were all the money in the world, spend much of it on affordable housing, spend much of it on mental health facilities and assistance, spend much of it on addiction detox facilities, and there may be other things. Those are just the 3 that have come up in today's conversation. If, in an ideal world, spend money on all those things and it would make a big, from what I'm hearing, I'm not asserting this, I'm just saying this is kind of what we've been hearing, would make a big difference. So this is my process suggestion. I'm not going to test for consensus because now you don't see in front of you visually and for the, oh, I'm sorry, Pamela, I'm so sorry. Yes, thank you.
I apologize for being late and I've missed part of the discussion, but I was interested in what Mikhail had said in terms of prevention. and we're working on two kinds of prevention, and we need to make sure we don't mix them up. Number one is to prevent people becoming homeless in the first place. Number two is when we get people into housing who have been homeless, to prevent them becoming homeless in the first place. And they're different kinds of services, and we need to make sure that we understand the separation. It's like when people have a chronic illness and you introduce the word prevention, it's preventing it getting worse or recurring again. And so I just need to make sure that we have that differentiation in regards to prevention. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that clarification. It's good. So as a process suggestion, how do we feel if the co-chairs and I kind of, it's not a lot of reworking, but integrate the different things and the suggestions that came here, which I've been scribbling around, but you don't want to see me type it and then put up there, it's not nice. And send it back out and do an email call for consensus to see, because I think we're very close, and I think this has been a real good conversation to sort of get the interests out there. Does that feel like a fair process on this? And we'll move on to, okay, I know I just assigned you both more work to do. You okay? Yeah, you love it. Okay, now the challenge is to find the next PowerPoint.
This question was to do a rule like this.
Okay, so while, yes, my technical assistance, thank you very much, is coming to find the next PowerPoint. We're going to move to factors for success. And I want to give a little bit of background, just to sort of orient us again what we're talking about and why we're talking about this. So the background is that in small group discussions, you had small group discussions with the co-chairs, with Palmer and Gail, before the March meeting. And in those small group discussions, you were talking about what are the essential elements or the factors for success for ideal placement of homeless services in Salt Lake, and are there any gaps in homeless facilities in Salt Lake City? And based on that, we presented a factors for success in the March meeting. And that was based on what we had heard from you as commission members. And you gave lots of input at the meeting on the factors for success. There was a good amount of public input on the factors for success, and the color for that would be pink. And what the public, at the open house, the public, there were these boards that had all the factors for success listed, and the public were asked to identify the top 2 factors that were most important to them. And with dots, they identified that. So on the pink sheet, the numbers that are behind each, so board number 1, for example, physical characteristics, and the first one, easy access, and the number 58, that means there were 58 dots. So for 58 people, that was one of their top 2 priorities, just so you kind of know what you're looking at here. And then, based on the factors for success, your input, the public input, the city staff took a stab at translating those factors for success into suggested criteria for site location and configuration. And those suggested criteria will ultimately be used in 2 ways. Or when they're finalized, they'll be used in 2 ways. Number 1, they're going to help city staff identify possible locations and configurations for homeless services or homeless emergency services, as it says in your mission. And that will include the current site and other sites, or reconfigured current site, whatever. But just, I mean, there's nothing on and off the table with that. So using the criteria that you guys will finalize at the next meeting, the staff will use that to identify and bring to you possible locations and configurations. And then the second piece will be you, as a group, will use those criteria to kind of vet those suggestions that are brought to you. Do they meet the criteria that we set up, that we think are the most important ones to meet those factors for success? So today, we want to introduce the suggested criteria today. I'm sure you're going to have lots of comments today, and then you'll have time to think about it. If you're like me, you need some time to think about it. We're going to have small group meetings with the co-chairs between this May meeting, and the August meeting, so you can have more detailed discussions about the criteria, and we'll revisit the criteria in August. So does that kind of give you a sense of where we're going with this? Okay. So the summary of public input that we got on the factors for success were pretty broad-ranging. And some of the public input talked about root causes of homelessness. You were just talking about some of that. They talked about necessary services to help individuals move out of and stay out of homelessness. They talked about the significance of affordable housing, and then they also talked about the factors for success. And so I think based on the discussion we just had, I think the commission recognizes that all those things need to be addressed ultimately. The factors for success You and others identified facility-related factors that support individuals while they're experiencing homelessness and as they transition out of homelessness. And so they were facility-related factors that support all the activities to some extent, that can support all the activities you're talking about. So now the challenge is, how do we tease out of that long list of factors for success some criteria that enable those factors to be successful? I guess they're factors for success to make them be successful. And the challenge is that we're only looking for a small number of criteria, because if you're going to use them to compare different sites, you can't have a list of 25, 50 things. It's unwieldy from a process perspective. So how do we winnow that down to really the most critical ones that really help you differentiate between possible locations and configuration options? And so again, I'm going to go through it briefly. What the staff put together, and unfortunately, I am now speaking on behalf of staff because staff is on vacation. Elizabeth is on vacation, and she didn't do this alone either, but she's on vacation, so anyway, so I get to speak. So we have and in terms of your colored pieces of paper, on yellow, if you like to see things and hold it in your hand, on yellow is the suggested criteria for site location and configuration. So you'll see that they're in 4 categories on the front. And on the back are, maybe I should talk about the back first. Okay, the back is not the criteria. The back, so I mentioned that the public input was very, very wide-ranging. And so the additional community input that staff has kind of collected and synthesized there are what they felt were significant factors for success, but not sure whether they actually translated into criteria for selecting location or configuration. And I'll jump ahead there. So it was housing, again, and services. And you can read it. Do I need to say it out loud? You can read it. You can hear it. And you can actually read it. And so these last 2 sections, again, are ones that staff are not suggesting as criteria, but wanted to not lose because there was so much public input about them. And then, is that me making that sound? The suggested criteria 4 categories: building and site design, location, site components, and then a separate family space, or family space that is separate from some of the other facilities. And on building and site design, again, I don't think I need to read them out loud. You can read them. In fact, maybe I'll just be quiet for a moment and let you read off your yellow sheets, and we'll forget the PowerPoint altogether. You can read off your yellow sheets, and then I'll look to see when somebody's ready to say something. Okay. So the question is, did we get the key criteria? Did the staff get kind of the key ones? That's the question.
So on the first one, I think on the building and site and design, we left out the whole word of technology. And when we talk about being able to develop a data metrics or a system to find out accountability, that we need a identifier or some type of technology that will show how many times the service is used or how many times they go in the courtyard. At IMC, IHC, they have badges every time they go in. At the Capitol, the speaker has a badge. And I think that technology is very important. I know Dennis has been working on a one card, but that's just for one segment of that whole group down there. So I think if we don't implement technology as 2 things, one, a cost driver to reduce cost, and so we can have data that's clear, concise. And then the second thing, it helps to understand predictive analytics and you know what's going to happen in the future when the temperature drops, like Matt has talked about in the winter. do we know that on this date, the weather's going to go down this much from past history? Quick story, Mrs. Field Cookies, they used predictive analytics to know how many cookies to bake on a cloudy, rainy day in San Francisco. Chocolate chip were 1,000 times more popular versus on a nice warm day, oatmeal raisin were there. And that's how they ran their business. Now you take that predictive analytics about, we know what the weather might be, are we going to have a greater population coming in? That day are we going to have less? What kind of service do we need? So I think technology has to be a real driver on this.
I think we have it under site components, but are you saying that it should go under building?
Yeah, because I think if you don't design your building with that in mind, and I'm just naturally thinking of all the green things that you want, you know, the effective use of water, heat, and that's what I'm talking about, the internal workings of that. But I think it's got to be in all of that as drivers, because you don't want to build a building and then find out a little bit later, oh gosh, I wish we would have put that in. The price of technology is diving. It's way going down. But the analytics of what comes out of that is invaluable.
And so you're suggesting that there is a design feature, a configuration and a design feature so that the buildings and the location can accommodate whatever technology one ultimately has.
I want this building to be able to utilize a solar panel or whatever it might be, so we reduce operating costs as much as possible and get those dollars back to mental health service or whatever we can do where the dollars can be more wisely spent.
Okay. Other thoughts, knowing that this is the first time you're seeing it and you're going to have opportunities to meet in small groups with the co-chairs after you've had time to digest it, but whether staff has captured, I'm going to shut that down. Is that okay? Because it's not the only one. So you have your yellow sheet in front of you. Well, there it is. It won't go away. Did they get the key criteria? Other observations about this?
Can I add one more?
Of course.
So I think when we look at this in the design, we want space with walls, space without walls, with green features, so these individuals can restart their lives. And that's one of the big things that I keep hearing is the privacy of what happens in a shelter where someone has to sleep with their tennis shoes, you know, tied around their neck because they're afraid they're going to be stolen in that environment. And I think the configuration can be much more adequate. And I'm wondering, do we have an architect here? There's Michael, and he could probably speak to that, of the efficiencies that drive that whole thing, what we're trying to do.
So actually, am I hearing two things? I mean,
yeah,
the wall, am I hearing two things in what you're saying? Because one is the green feature, that's what I'm hearing, if I'm not getting it right. But one is kind of the green features, which is, I think, your technology piece. And then the walls and the moving walls, is that the flexibility?
Configuration.
Flexibility.
Yeah, flexibility, exactly.
And
is there a locker component on that? You know, sleep deprivation drives a lot of behavior of the homeless. And so if you can really get them in a place where they can sleep, that will rebuild their internal workings.
Okay. Other thoughts? Just saying. Okay. Other observations? Yes, I'm sorry. It is far over there. Thank you, Mayor Seguini.
I think it's absolutely critical to have a place for safe storage.
Safe storage?
Yes. Amen. Because that's the biggest complaint I hear. They don't have safe storage and they lose all of their stuff.
Okay. So when we have, when you go down under site components, 1, 2, 3, 4, includes access to, and then in the middle there is storage. Is there a way we should describe it that's clearer?
Well, safe storage.
Safe storage? Fine. Great.
Maybe they have lockers in the halls or something. But
Right. So, yeah. Okay. Great. Yes, please.
It seems like some of you are about design and some are about location. And I'm wondering if there's any priority to these. Are there some of these elements that are absolutely critical, or are they all intended to be equally as critical? You know, I mean, it'll be interesting if we can fit all of those criteria into the same location and the same design, or is there some priority that we got to look at? If something has to be given up, what is that? Or is this the list of priority?
It was presented to me as without priority, but that doesn't mean that's how it should be. And I just made a note to self, actually. I mean, have a conversation about it now, but I just made a note to self that when you're having your small group meetings with the co-chairs, I have a feeling they're going to come right back to that really excellent question, whether you think there is a priority to them. And yeah, it's wonderful.
Just again, just a clarifying question. Are we talking about a blank canvas where if the world was our oyster, how would we start this and how would we create it? Or are we talking about existing facilities and what we would do to improve or change what's there? I mean, because if I had a blank canvas, I look at this very differently than if I'm trying to make better what I'm looking at that exists right now. What is this?
So I have an answer, but I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer. So
Well,
do you have something?
Well, let's hear your answer, and then I'll add in just something we talked about as well.
My understanding is that both are on the table. Reconfiguring existing or adding on to existing, reconfiguring, and looking at something totally new or mix and match elsewhere.
That's essentially, we didn't want to predetermine one or the other before we got to the criteria and so on, so we could vet whether the current location could work, whether it could move somewhere else.
But the reason we're going about it in this very, as Palmer I think mentioned, methodical way with doing what's the factors for success to help people get out of homelessness and stay out of homelessness is, and then let's look at whatever it is that can really make those factors for success work the best. And that may or may not be something new, something current, whatever.
You can get more ambitious if you aren't, if you're not held back by anything that's existing. You can really look at some of these features and really even be more creative or bring more if you're...
Creativity is good.
Okay.
We like creativity. Thank you. Okay, other thoughts? I know, it's hard. We ask you this on a Friday afternoon when it's supposed to rain for, I just heard, the next 7 days. Yay. Okay, so we need it. We need it. Yes.
I guess I come from this background that suggests this is a really simple thing. I think what we have to do is look at the cost, and we need to do a cost analysis of what it would cost to rebuild, reconfigure what we have in existence right now versus redesigning a brand new one. We might find that redesigning a new one is so cost prohibitive that we could never do that. We might find that remodeling, redesigning existing is way too cost prohibitive. So I think somewhere in these committees that you have, we need to start to implement a practical side of this to say, this is what a new one would cost, and this is what a redesign and a rebuild of this one would cost. And once we get those figures, I think that's what's going to drive the decision. If you have the money or you don't have the money. I mean, this is going to be a cost allocation. This is a pretty simple, basic analysis that we need to put together to figure out all this criteria that we have here. But at the end of the day, when we go to the speaker, or we go to private funders and everyone else, if the price tag is X and this one is X, then that's what's going to drive this decision. But I think, like the speaker said, the canvas of putting, if you have an opportunity to recreate everything and make it so we can think 20, 30, maybe 50 years out. So the next commission will not be sitting here saying, oh gosh, I wish they would have done this or that, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, and every person that's sitting here, you either remodel or you go buy a new home. And you just look at the cost figures that are on it, that drive the decision.
So what I'm taking from that is that cost should perhaps be one of the criteria. And with the suggestion over here, are any of them higher priority than others? For you at least, Scott, cost would be one of the highest priorities. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Well,
yes or no? No, it's not yes or no, but I mean, did I kind of get what you were saying?
You absolutely got it right.
Sorry.
I think, but that's just a realistic thing unless we have another $500 million in surplus, and we can count on that, but that's not going to happen.
Okay.
Michelle, let me just, we had some discussion about, the financial piece of this. In fact, I was talking with one of the members of the commission before the meeting about that very thing. And it is very important. We didn't want to fetter, if you will, or constrain some of the success factors by cost at the beginning. It has to be part of this analysis, though. But we didn't want it to try and constrain the ideas, all of the good things that we saw as an ideal situation to help people get out of homelessness. So in a way, it's a matter of timing. It needs to be part of this. I'm not disagreeing, but I was trying to explain earlier that it was something we didn't just want to do up front because we felt like it could be a constraint, but it is part of the process.
Other comments at this point before you've had time to digest them? It's because you all like to end the meetings early. I'm getting the drift here of how this works. Okay, so with that, please take them and think about them and think about whether we got the right ones, whether staff got the right ones as the key criteria. As was suggested, think about whether in your mind any of them have higher priority than others. So do we really have a short list of the short list? Is that what we need? And Palmer, I think, are you going to describe kind of where we're going from here? And then
I will.
Are people okay? We don't have any cookies for you. Now I'm hungry for cookies after all that.
Mike's got
But, I'm sorry, yes.
I'm a little reluctant to try to put individual costs or some kind of idea to any one of these items here because, at the end of the day, when we launch whatever plan it is, that's the time when you look at it and say, here's the cost for this, and now there's a priority. I wouldn't put a priority here until I knew the cost, as an example. I mean, can it happen? Can it happen? Anyway, that's just not a good process, to not know what the costs are before you decide to prioritize it. You could say, here's my wish list. I like all these things on the wish list. How many of these are possible? Maybe they're all possible. Maybe we can raise all the money in the world. But let's not limit it at this point.
So let's not limit by cost. Let's not cut things off because they maybe cost too much.
I'm not saying don't take cost off the list. At the end of the day, cost is going to be important. But don't try to prejudge what that might be or pre-prioritize. It may be the cheapest thing we could do, one of these items.
Okay.
But let's not push that one too quick.
Okay. Thank you.
That doesn't go against what Scott was trying to say.
We agree. We agree with that.
If you think you agree, that's great, because I do too.
Well,
Okay,
I think
but
there's
but
one
it's-
other, oh, go ahead. Did somebody have something else?
Thank you.
I've got one
Thanks for
other,
bringing that up.
one that I want to add that I think is real important. On separate family space, as we look at what goes on down just in that Rio Grande area, I think it is absolutely critical that we break out men, women, and families. And when I say that, when I say break out, that they are completely away from each other. I mean,
So three separations.
three separations that I believe would drive a different behavior. And, this last week, we've spent a lot of time, and the consultant that came in said one of the most challenging things is when you have a family or a single mother with children sitting next to these 2 or 3 men that are in there, how demoralizing and challenging that is for that individual mother to have to sit there. And if you read the Deseret News this morning, they actually walked down the street, and this mother had said that she just saw this guy shoot up, and then she was trying to explain to her daughter and all that. So I think you have to have that in this world that we're going to try and design.
Okay, thanks for the observation. Okay, yes.
One thing is Washington Middle Shelter, and a lot of the things you've been talking about are going to be considered in the Middle Shelter, including private rooms for husbands and wives to take some time and be husbands and wives. Did you give them a title, those rooms?
I think we just refer to them as family rooms.
You don't have to get too descriptive about it, it's okay. But we got.
But that was a big problem in the shelter.
Of course.
You've got married couples and.
Right. So, thanks.
We've got some wonderful things at that shelter.
Whoa, okay. That was
That's how
emphasis.
wonderful they are.
Okay. Any other, in part it's the glare in the room, so if I haven't been calling on you, I'm sorry. You all have halos and it's really quite lovely, but that means I can't see when you raise your hand. Yes, Pamela.
Scott, to your observation in terms of families? see where
Scott, you're being addressed.
Conversely, although I agree there should be separate spaces for families, men and women, conversely, it's sometimes a beautiful thing to see the effect that children have on some of our homeless friends who are male. It's been very soothing at times, and a lot of my homeless friends will tell me how much they've learned from being around the kids. They like to talk to them about what they've done at school. So when we're talking about making sure that they're not integrated, we have to be very careful that we don't lose some of the positive values of what we've seen happen to men that they will attribute to having interaction with children of all ages, even the teenagers. And it softened them and made them look at the world through different eyes. As you know, we all learn from children, and our homeless male friends are not any exception. So.
Pamela, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't think we're talking about what happens on any evening late at night. People are laying on the sidewalks out in front of the shelter.
I'm not talking about that.
I believe that's part of the separation we're talking about. I think you're talking about very positive.
I'm talking about shelter. Yeah. Thank you.
That's the unacceptable.
Right. Okay, yes.
The criminal element that goes along with it. We talk about separation and everybody throws everything into one bucket. But the registered sexual offenders, I mean, the separation of that, to me, that's hugely important. How do we address that? And I think that's got to, we talk about safety through crime prevention and things like that. And so I think we need to talk to our law enforcement and see how we address that elephant in the room.
The sex offenders in particular. The sex offenders in particular? I don't know which one it was. That's for my note. Yeah, okay, good. Yes, Carl?
One question I have, and as we look at the site, and how does Midvale factor into that? Like, do you need a Midvale shelter anymore after in the alternative analysis, would you need a Midvale shelter anymore?
So I'm not sure we're ready to answer that.
No, but I'm just wondering, like, in your site, looking at your options, is there a version, do you have to have a separate family overflow shelter?
I think the answer is I don't know, and we don't, at this point, without the criteria, as far as I know, nobody has really put together site locations or configurations. I mean, if I went around the room, everybody has ideas of maybe what it would look like, except for me, because I don't have any ideas on these things. But I don't think anybody's really put something out on paper, and so I don't know. I think we don't know. Is that fair, Palmer and Gail?
Well, maybe it's the word consolidation,
Maybe Matt, you can respond to it.
In the present tense, Carlton, we need to keep in mind that while the Midvale shelter is serving families exclusively right now, that's in response to a trend, a surge in family homelessness, but we do have the ability to provide shelter there to single men if that be the need. With all of the existing capacity that we currently have, we most definitely need Midvale. Not to have Midvale would be to suggest that we need to add more beds to a site or create such flow that somehow 300 beds nightly could be taken offline.
I'm not doubting the current. I'm just saying if you're looking at a new site or if you're looking at a building and site criteria, would part of the criteria be consolidation into a single facility rather than running two facilities long-term? I mean, if you're looking at some of the issues surrounding that, I think you have to somehow take that into account.
Palmer,
No,
you want me to go first, and you're going to say whether I said it wrong. Okay, no. So my understanding is that all options, I know I sound like a broken record, but really that all options are on the table, and one of those could be consolidating everything in one place.
It could be also dispersing further, couldn't it?
I'm sorry?
Dispersing further?
It could be. That could be an option as well. So I know it's not a satisfactory answer, but I think we don't know.
If we rephrase that question.
Yes?
Under the building and site design, what we're talking about is capacity. So there's an issue of capacity for women, capacity for men, and capacity for families, defining families as man with child, woman with child, or however you want to define families in today's age. But, so we could rephrase your question to say we need to, in this evaluation, which would go to location, building design, site components, we have to evaluate the capacity.
For the different categories. Thank you.
And thus,
That's
based
great.
upon new facilities, capacities, we get this question.
Yeah, that's
Right.
very good.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Other? So, Palmer, can you?
Yes,
I think.
I know we're
unless
coming-
Gail- Oh, sorry. No.
No, okay.
Yep. Yeah.
As we're looking at design, site design, building, all the things that we're going to include, and we've talked a little bit about cost, is this, as Carlton described in his, is this a county effort or a county-owned facility with the nexus being with the city of Salt Lake and the state, or is this who do we imagine as we come up with this idea? What political subdivision is going to own this, or how are we? It's important for me to know as we're describing all this where the ownership of this is ultimately going to be, or do we know?
Well, let me see if I can respond to that. Currently, the shelter facilities are held by Shelter the Homeless, Inc., which is...
And the rescue mission.
And the rescue mission as its own. So it's all in private hands at the moment. I understand that the county, as part of their process, is looking at the whole issue of governance. And I would expect, because this has been brought up in a prior meeting, and I thought the direction was that would fall more into the county's discussion than it would in ours at this point, because we really haven't talked about who might own them, how, would it be a statewide, from a governance standpoint, would it be by county? They're located in the city right now, and so the city has taken up this issue of the current site and potential relocation, but we really haven't gotten to the governance piece. And while we've brought it up, we understood, at least it was my understanding, that might fall in the collective impact discussion. And I don't know, Carlton, if that...
Yeah, I was going to say, Carlton, don't feel put on the spot.
Yeah,
Is there something you want to
I don't
add?
know if
Seriously,
that's...
don't, you're
Well,
not on.
I'll just say, it's fair to say that we really haven't delved into that part. We wanted to get our targets and our outcomes set and our measurements and then evaluated as part of that. I have little doubt that that would be a part of a discussion before something different was, proposed or created.
And what I'm hearing is that for you personally, at least, governance of the, whatever this facility / plural looks like is a really important criteria, dare I say, for you.
The more stakeholders, the more, because my interest is best practices. Whatever we would be able to come in such a collaborative way to look to do this the best. This is a model that the state, I think, would have a role in, because I would like to see if this works and this is a smart way to do it, that this is something the state could replicate or use as best practice in some of the challenges it has around the whole state. But knowing that, and knowing as you're trying to get your head around what costs are related to which efforts or how we would do this, we don't want to throw anything out because of cost, but we certainly have to understand how we're going to get water at the end of the row. And the more we have the different political subdivisions involved, and as long as we can see a strengthening of the nexus between each state, county, city, then your options in terms of costs are even brighter in terms of how, and the private participation. So some of that framework is relevant to me because it really does inform this process and what's even possible. So.
Okay, thanks for making that clear. I mean, so that we all understand that. Scott, did you have something you want to?
Just one thing, as I've learned and gathered more information, Chris's organization takes no state, local, federal, any type of dollars. They are purely 100% public. I mean, they raise their own fund. I think Kathy's accepts a fair amount of public funding, let's just say that. Matt, I think you guys do, and then you raise that. And I think as we look at this, it's one of those issues that we probably should bring up to the table sooner about the governance on this, because we might design this place and have all this in mind, and someone goes, well, who's going to pay for that? And so I think the governance model is one that is probably very, very important as we look at partnering. Is this going to be a private? Is it going to be another road home entity that pops up and says, well, we want to do this? Because remember, this is, well, let me rephrase it. The thing that I have found the most disturbing is that we shouldn't be in a competitive mode on this. What we should be, these are human souls. This is not like IBM versus Oracle versus Chevrolet versus Lexus and all that. And somehow we've got to come to an area where we funnel all those dollars into the governance of this that makes the most sense for our homeless brothers and sisters, who can produce the most and best results that drive graduation from the street back into a productive life. So I kind of, well, listening to the speaker, I think that's a pretty important point that he made. And I didn't mean to leave out CCS, by the way. So you're still there. And
I think we understand the point, knowing that there are many specifics to demonstrate the point. Okay, looking around, are we good? I don't, sorry, really, you all do have halos. It's lovely, but it makes it hard. Okay.
Okay.
I think.
Okay, because I know we're coming to the end of our time. So let me, first of all, I don't know if Representative Chavez House is still here.
She's here.
I just wanted to.
As well as Representative Holloway.
Oh, good.
I saw that. That's
I
too
just
funny.
wanted to recognize them.
You know,
I've had my back to them, but I have a note that they're here, and I wanted to welcome them and thank them for their time. But lastly, I just wanted to kind of summarize where we will be in the next couple months until our August meeting. We found it to be very valuable to meet in the smaller groups. Obviously, this is a very large commission. And the work that was done today will help guide those discussions and will raise new issues. The governance issue, for example, I think is really, really important, and we'll need to include that. So what we hope to do is work in the small group meetings over the summer. We want to talk about the case studies, the best practices. There was a field trip that some of you may have been on to Portland and Seattle to look at those facilities. We are going to be arranging a trip in early August to the LA area. As many, and I know this is difficult because we don't have the funds, we're not funded for travel, but it has to be, we kind of have to cover our own expenses, but as many of our commissioners that can actually see some of these facilities, it's very helpful. So we'd encourage those of you that can to join us on that trip. We want to work in the small groups on the suggested criteria for site location and configuration, everything that we've started. This was all draft work today that will get us going. So we're going to do that, and we'll have several meetings set up at your convenience so that we can meet in those smaller groups. We're finding that that's where a lot of the good work is getting done. We also would like to encourage you to continue to visit the facilities. There have been some great opportunities. We just went to the 4th Street Clinic, and that was a great opportunity. So we'd encourage you to continue doing that. We're really grateful, Chief, for the host program. And there is a meeting every Tuesday and Thursday, is that correct, at 1 o'clock? I've been to one of those meetings. It's invaluable because Fred has really been growing a great group of people who are in the circumstances that we're talking about, and the learning that comes from that has just been invaluable. So we'd encourage you to attend a host meeting, and that's Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1. And any other possible things that we can bring to the table. We'll try and encourage that as well. So the next meeting that we'll have will be August 14th. That's on our schedule at 1:30 p.m. I presume it's in the same place as here. It's here. And in the meantime, we're going to do some very, very hard work in our smaller groups and then bring to the table any other issues. As I've said, as we've said, we don't want to rule things out at this point, anything. We want this to be as open as possible, and so we can get the best information that we can. So I want to thank you again for your attendance today, and if there are any other comments, Fred first, and then we'll go to you, Speaker Hughes.
Anybody's more than welcome to come ride with me or him.
Oh yeah, the rides.
Anytime. The afternoons are great, but you get to see it firsthand and actually get to interact and talk to the homeless.
Right.
Their voices need to be heard.
Right.
And just don't take it from me. Hear it from them.
Thank you. Yes, Speaker Hughes.
Palmer, you described our work in the summer. When does this culminate to recommendations, or is it, when do we start to see what it is what's the product of the work?
Right. Our process, and I don't have the dates in front of me.
November,
Here,
after the
would you
August meeting.
talk about that?
After the August meeting, then in November will come, that's where preliminary recommendations will be considered, with the final set of recommendations to be made in December.
And my only input to that would be if there's a state nexus, sooner than probably even December would be the best, as the governor's putting his budget together and his priorities, and if we're looking at priorities in the state, sooner rather than later, lets that germinate and lets us start to have discussions internally. So December starts to get a little bit close to that general session, so if we have a state nexus, maybe a little sooner, but that would be helpful.
Yes.
Is there a way to get the contact information for these other facilities? Some of us travel.
Sure.
Day-to-day travels, Vegas, Virginia, where we
Right.
happen to be that week.
And that's
that we
how
can reach out on our own possibly?
Right, exactly, and that's how we've received some of the input from people who have been to various sites. So we will do that.
Thank you.
We have one recommendation that we go to Sweden,
Yes, Scott.
Just one thing, we have really supported Fred's job a day, and so as the coalition, we have found a building that we want to house a true temporary work agency there. And Big D has volunteered to put the infrastructure in. We've approached DWS about having permanent people there. And if anyone here would like to participate with us in that, we think it's key. It's the Cafe Orbit. Is that the name of it, Fred? Orbit? And it's right down there, and we want to put up the signage to say job a day right here. And it's where we have gone out to different business people, and we've had a plethora of individuals say, we'd be happy to hire some of these people, but we think if we can get a permanent place where it's, right now it's scattered at CCS and it's the road home, and I don't know, Laura, if you have it at your place, but there's some different areas, but we think if we get it in one place and everybody can say, if you want a job, go right down here in the street. It's very close, within 2 blocks. So we welcome if anyone wants to participate in that. One of the things that we don't want to do is be all siloed off. I think when PPC says that, you should all feel free to participate in any way that you want to or not. But this job a day, it works. It absolutely works. Fred has placed how many people?
I'm losing track. About 5 a day right now.
5 a day. And look, if they have a place where they can go to instead of just Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they can go over to that temporary agency, we think that that's going to make a graduation rate much higher where they have it. So we hope to get that all finalized in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Good, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I believe we are adjourned, and thank you again.